All right. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Phil Tocco. I'm with Michigan State University Extension, and I am an on-farm produce safety educator, and I cover the entire state with respect to on-farm food safety. This program would not be possible without the generous support of the USDA NIFA. They granted a group of us money to be able to put this together. So, and also we have some pretty awesome partners in UVM, the National Farmers Union, and Cornell Cooperative Extension. They bring a lot of knowledge to the table, and they're really, it's great to have them here. I've learned a tremendous amount from all of them. And more importantly, I've learned a lot from all of you being the farmers. One of the valuable things about us getting together like this is that we all can learn from one another. We learn as much from this stuff. We educators learn as much from the farmers as the farmers would learn from us. So definitely each of you are going to have perspectives and are going to have things to say. And we really want you to share them, because you never know when the one thing that you have sparks something in some other farmer, and all of a sudden there's a lot of change happening. So definitely you are the experts in the room. I'm just sort of a spectator by our facilitator. So this is just a rundown of what we're going to cover today. We're going to do introductions here in a second, and then I've got a little piece on the quick and dirty of wash water management, just the key components of what need to be, or what a lot of people think need to be monitored with respect to FSMA. And then we're going to let Katie talk a little bit about her experiences in farming at Student Organic Farm and at her other operations. And then I'm going to kind of give you a little overview of some things that I saw when I visited Jericho Settlers Farm a couple of years ago in Vermont, and some things I thought that were really relevant to wash water management that we're going to talk. Then we're going to do a make and take. So those of you all should have received a box in the mail. If you sent me your address, you should have received a box in the mail with a bunch of stuff. We're going to go over what's in the box, because it's all stuff you can use right away. And then there's ingredients to make a make and take. So if you brought yourself a standard head screwdriver and all that stuff, we're going to go through the make and take for the sanitizer doser. And then we're going to do Q&A. And then the end of it, we're going to follow up talking about what's next in terms of your plan. And that's will be pretty important too. So why don't we start with introductions? So if you guys can say your name, your farm name, and then do you use water to wash produce, and whether it's batch water or single-use water or both? Okay. So my name again is Phil Tocco. I don't have a farm, but I live here in Michigan. I do a lot of gardening, and I actually use sanitizer. So I use Sanitizer in batch water. So for that much. Now I'm going to hand it over to Hans, and hopefully Hans can introduce himself too.
Okay, hi everyone. I did say my name before. I'm down in the southeast corner of Vermont. We call it the Banana Belt of Vermont, that is. And I do have a small farm and have been gardening and worked on farms my whole life, and do use dunk tanks, three to four, and sanitizer. I'm actually testing 3 different peroxyacetic acid sanitizers that are varying ages, 3 to 5 years old. So they're past their date, and I'm going to be comparing them and see how they hold up, different versions of them. So I'm doing a little trial with my winter greens sales this winter.
Hey, all, good evening. Billy Mitchell, National Farmers Union, Local Food Safety Collaborative. I am based in Athens, Georgia. Just food safety education right now. I did have the opportunity to grow vegetables for a long time, and we did not add sanitizer to the wash water when I was growing vegetables. Somebody once told me grapeseed oil was a sanitizer, and one time I dumped a bunch of that in there and it made the greens taste weird, so we stopped. Phil, that's not a recommendation. I'm not telling people to do that. That's a learn from my past mistakes moment. And I'm just excited to hear from you all today. And I'll pass the mic over to Katie.
Hello, I'm Katie Brandt with the MSU Student Organic Farm and Organic Farmer Training Program. I have been using wash water in many ways. I worked on a lot of small farms before I got my own farm going, and that was kind of in the Wild West days before food safety was a thing on farms, unfortunately. Then I had my own farm for a dozen years, and now I'm at the Student Organic Farm. And yeah, we are using Sanidate, and I'll get to that of that when I speak in a bit.
How about the Kerns next?
Hello, I'm Cindy
And I'm Rich.
Kern, and we operate Cardinal Farms, which we started in 2019 after I graduated from the MSU Student Organic Farm Training, run by Katie Brent, taught by Katie Brent. So we have Cardinal Farms here in Southline, Michigan.
Yep, it's 10 acres, about a half acre is dedicated to growing produce. And the rest, we have sheep, goats, pigs, and chickens as well. So we've got quite a mixed bag of activity here. So.
And we do use Sanidate. We have a very temporary wash pack set up, and we're working on a larger, more permanent structure. No one else is on my screen. Brian.
My name's Brian. I'm with Croca Expeditions here in New Hampshire. As far as water, we use single use here with no sanitizer, but farm before that I owned, we used batch water for, I don't know, about 10 years. And then we used sanitizer then. So I am interested in seeing what other people are doing as far as all that's concerned.
Okay, do you want to pass the mic to Clay?
Hello, I'm Clay Brady. I run Foster Brady Farm. That is in Monroe, Georgia. But I'm actually right now at my house in Athens, Georgia. So we're somewhere in the same area code, I think, Billy. So we have a farm year-round producing fruits and vegetables. We also have chickens that produce eggs. So I'm running both of those things to the same wash station. I use mostly single use just for, that's what I'm comfortable with the people that I'm working with. But we do have two separate sinks that we use for eggs and for produce. So I try to keep those two things separate. As for sanitizers, I'm mostly using a bleach solution, but we also use a hydrogen peroxide based sanitizer. I don't know who hasn't gone yet.
How about Kendall?
Hi, I'm Kendall. My farm is called Three Creeks Produce, and we're located in Central Ohio, close to Columbus. We have 7 acres, and we do produce and some chicken eggs as well. Currently, we're using both batch and single use, but I am here to learn a little bit more how to use Sanidate more effectively. We've got some kicking around, but we mostly use it to sanitize surfaces for the time being, and just stick to fresh water, probably change more often than it needs to be. So I'm here to learn about that. And I think Sarah is showing up on my screen.
Hi, I'm Sarah Brown. I'm part of Common Ground Farm Collective, which is a farm in progress. My partner and I are just in the startup phase. So we're not currently growing or washing any produce, but previous farms I've worked at, I'm in Tucson, Arizona. This have used batch water and no sanitizers, but typically multiple sinks of water that we change fairly frequently. So I'm excited to learn more tonight. And I'll kick it to Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff Anthony. My farm is Pinewood Springs Farm in Rockdale County, Georgia. We're in the process of setting up our wash pack station. We're using single use, but I'm also interested in using Sanidate for our egg washing. We have an egg washing machine, actually. It's probably a tangent, but just interested in using how to use Sanidate for that as well.
Cool. That should be everybody. So we're gonna, I'll move on. Did anyone not get a box in the mail? Okay. So everybody here got a box. Good. That's something I want to make sure we all got. You got it. All right. as Billy shows off his stuff. So good. Cool. So this, again, this is a 3-year project, multi-state. Scrub stands for sanitizing and cleaning resources in your business. So the idea that we're talking about cleaning a lot and sanitizing. The key, again, is to develop a lot of versatile resources and it's basically from the ground up. So that's why you're here. We'll give you hands-on technical assistance as a follow-up to this. Again, we're aiming for 375 growers, and we're on our way to doing that well. Each one of you, hopefully at the end of this, will have some ideas on little things that you can do to fix on your farm or to implement on your farm. And when you do that, you can fill out that form that Hans put in the chat and basically send it to me via email, and we can talk through it, and I can help you achieve those goals. Hopefully, the other thing too is that in that box, there may be some tools that you can use that you can make some quick fixes really easy and have some easy wins. So again, the power packs that we're trying to get at, we're partnering with individual farms. You folks here are part of the participants that are working through the stuff through the Twilight highlights. And then we have advisors that are helping us along too, and educators like myself who are helping to move things along. So again, the idea is very impact driven. That's really what we're going for. So, and again, technical assistance, the idea is really thinking about there's a lot of easy things that people can do. And when given the right resources and a little bit of space, they can get it done. So it's mostly just providing the time and the resources to get things done. So again, the idea is to meet growers where they are, working one-on-one. That's why when you complete that form that Hans put in the chat and you share it with me, then we can go back and forth and make sure that it gets done. For those of you that are physically close to me, we can maybe even see each other and do stuff. So that'd be cool too. And really the key is to look at tracking production flows, making things move faster, more efficiently, as well as more food safe. So it's both more efficient and food safe. So, and again, there's lots of places along the supply chain where you could use sanitizer. So some things that particularly you might want to pay attention to with respect to implementation is things like monitoring turbidity in batch water, safer use of sanitizers. Maybe you use the glug method when it comes to measurement of bleach to sanitize surfaces, 1 glug, 2 glugs, 3 glugs, depending on how things go. You listen, I am as guilty as anyone else of using the glug method to measure bleach. So hopefully you'll walk out of here with some additional ways of measuring bleach or measuring sanitizer where you can do some positive steps. Another key that we'll talk about is more efficient wash water management, particularly with respect to measuring sanitizers or monitoring turbidity and other things like that. Another thing that you could work on is sanitizer SOPs. So if you want to use sanitizer, or you have been using sanitizer, but you haven't taken the time to put together an SOP, maybe we can come up with a template that'll make it that much easier that you can tweak for your methods, those kinds of things. All of these are good wins, and that's what we're looking for. Not a lot of time and could improve efficiency. So right after the workshop, you're going to see the slide again at the end. Right after the workshop, in the next day or so, email me the plan and your resource needs to me, and then reach out as needed. And if there's ways that we can help you with resources, whether they be getting you the right place to buy stuff, or the right place or the right information to implement stuff, we can certainly get that to you. And then reach out as needed through implementation, and then follow up with photos or information or emails just to let us know that you did it. And we will, as Billy said, he's been known to bug people. I've been known to bug people too. I'm really good at it. So I will probably be following up with you guys regularly just to see how things are going. So that's my job here. So when it comes to the down and dirty, there's really only 5 things that from a perspective of the FSMA produce safety rule, there's 5 things they really worry about. But a lot of them, no matter what your scale, you really need to think about them. The first is generic E. coli, then pH, temperature, turbidity, and sanitizer concentration, if you're using sanitizer. Now, there's no requirement under the FSMA produce safety rule to use sanitizer, and I would, if you're not comfortable using sanitizer, I absolutely would not encourage you to move to that. But learn about sanitizers, certainly learn about and understand how to use them. And you might find them to be something that you're not as uncomfortable to use as you might think, particularly in wash water. So with respect to E. coli, post-harvest water has to have no detectable generic E. coli. That can be done either through taking samples and figuring out from a lab test and then not using the water more than once, or it could be used by accomplished by adding a sanitizer to the water. So by treating the water, you're achieving that no detectable generic E. coli. Now, untreated surface water must not be used, and that's usually, I would say, a good practice no matter what size you are. Don't use surface water post-harvest untreated. So just across the board. And with respect to testing, if you were testing the water, the presence absence sampling is allowed. So those are some basic rules around generic E. coli. pH is important generally only with respect to if you're going to use bleach as a sanitizer, pH becomes important, particularly with respect to if you have a situation where you have a low pH water and you have high temperatures, then you could have potential for chlorine dissipating. That's true for cleaning as well as putting it in post-harvest water. So you do need to watch that if you're using bleach on some level. But pH generally doesn't change a water. So once you have a general idea of the tendency of your water, you probably don't have to measure pH like on an hourly basis or whatnot. So with temperature, this is an issue with crops that are pulpy. If the temperature is high, or if the temperature is low, pardon me, and the produce is warm, what will happen is the water will actually be drawn into the produce. And this is, like I say, particularly an issue with crops that are pulpy. You don't see this a lot with peppers, but you do see this a lot with tomatoes and cantaloupe. Typically where there's abrasions or where there's a stem scar that hasn't healed over, it'll suck up the water. Now, the problem is if there's bacteria in the water and the bacteria gets sucked up in with the water, all of a sudden now the bacteria cannot be removed from that crop. And they're in a situation, it's an awful lot like the gut that they like to live in. It's warm, it's dark, there's lots of nutrients, so it goes a little crazy inside the crop. So that's why we try and make sure that we keep the temperature of the water and the pulp within 10 degrees. I realize that if your goal is to try and cool down the produce as quickly as possible, staying within 10 degrees isn't really a good thing. So there's a lot of ways to cool produce other than using water. And we're not going to get into that here, but if you want to talk about it offline afterwards, we can certainly talk about some ways that you can cool produce on a post-harvest level that will work that don't involve water. So with turbidity, this is an important one because both dirt and plant juices can get in the water. And despite the fact that it seems like there would be a correlation between the amount of dirt in your water and the amount of bacteria in your water, there really isn't. There's been really clean water that has huge bacteria counts, and there's been particularly dirty water that has low bacteria counts. So there's really no direct connection there. But the big problem is when you're using something like chlorine bleach, and there's a lot of soil, the chlorine particles, the hypochlorous acid, the stuff, the active stuff in chlorine that actually does the killing of the bacteria sticks to the organic matter in the soil. So then instead of actually killing the bacteria, it just hangs on to the soil particles. So that's why it's important to think about, particularly when you're using a kind of sanitizer and wash water, how much dirt's in the water. So that's pretty important. And then the last one is sanitizer concentration. It's important to understand that when you're using sanitizer, it's not just the concentration that causes the kill, it's concentration plus contact time. You can decrease the concentration and increase the time that the sanitizer is exposed to the bacteria, and you'll get the same level of kill as if you used a higher concentration of sanitizer. So there's ways of manipulating those together to determine the kill. And it's important to at least sort of familiarize that. Now, in choosing a sanitizer, a lot of folks think immediately about price, and price is important. When you think about chlorine bleach, it's cheap, it's available. Hey, why not go with it, right? If you've ever bought a mini bulk of Sanidate, you know it's really, really, really expensive. But there's other considerations to think about when you're choosing what sanitizer to go with. The most important one is, what is that sanitizer going to touch? Because sanitizer has a tendency, what certain sanitizers have a tendency of corroding certain things. Now, this is the first time we're going to use the hand cam. You'll notice that in the list of people that are in the gallery, there's one called hand cam. And what I'm going to show you is I had taken 3 different metals. I took aluminum, I took galvanized, and I took stainless steel. And I washed them every day for 3 months with soap and water and scrubbed them. And then I treated them with sanitizer and let them air dry. Over time, what I saw was you got to see some of the corrosion involved with each of these sanitizers. I treated them with quaternary ammonia, with aluminum, and with Sanidate. So this is, or no, with chlorine bleach and with Sanidate, pardon me. So in this case, what you're seeing is the aluminum, and I want to make sure I'm getting it right for you guys. If you look here, this is the quaternary ammonia. And then you'll notice a little bit, if you can see in the middle there, that chlorine bleach, you see that little bit of pitting you see? That's after 3 months of daily washing. And there's just a little bit of pitting there. You can imagine doing that for a couple of years. That would cause problems on aluminum. And then this last one is Sanidate. You see some mild pitting, but not a major amount of pitting. So, yeah. And then this one, this is where it's most pronounced in the galvanized. Here again, we're looking at quaternary ammonia in this corner over here. And then the middle is the chlorine. And again, what's interesting about the middle is you can see along the edge, let me see if I can get it right in there. There's enough of a delay, it's causing me issues. You see along that edge, there's a lot of what looks to be dirt. It's actually corrosion, and it's pretty nasty. And then there's a little corrosion on the Sanidate on the end there. So I see a couple chat things. Can everyone see the hand cam? That's a good question. I see one yes. I see a couple fingers. Okay, good. Now, the last bit is stainless, and I just want to show it off. The thing is with stainless is there's nothing to see because all 3 of them pretty much weathered the same. And they basically didn't weather after 3 months. So all 3 of these are as if they were done like the same day, like the first time. So the point is, what you use, it really should depend, at least in part, on what it's going to touch. The other thing to think about is we always think about the initial, what the water is held in, but sometimes we need to think about where the water goes and what it touches on its way out the door. I've been in situations where people have had treated concrete, and they use a lot of PAA, and that PAA gets dumped on the floor and hits the drain. And what you'll see over time is it'll wear away all of the fine particles, so that you'll basically see the aggregate popping through. So be aware too about where that water goes and what it touches on its way as it leaves. That's another thing to think about. Was there any questions? Because I hear a couple of people off of mute. Okay. So then the other thing to think about is the quality of the dilution water. Whether if you've got hard water, sometimes certain things will interact, or if it's a, like I said, a low pH with high temps and chlorine, there could be some problems. And also whether or not there's going to be direct produce contact is pretty important. And then the last bit is soil load. And the idea there is really thinking about making sure that if you're using something like chlorine that's going to adhere to the soil, that you think about either monitoring regularly and adding more as the free chlorine drops, or switching to a different sanitizer. So those are some things to think about. So one thing that I want to sort of show to you guys is a grid that was created by Mary U Biosciences that I appropriated and changed some things and added some things to. that I think are appropriate to small and mid-sized farmers. And the idea here is really that you can look at what you want to do and then look at what are the positives and negatives of each of these 4 classes of chemicals, and then try and figure out which will work for you based on some of the issues that you have. And I'm going to skip over, I actually put 3 scenarios in here for us to try, and I'm going to skip over them because in the interest of time. So basically the idea, I'll pick one. Okay. In this case, we have a situation where this is a wash pack facility for a small farm, and they put sanitizer in those plastic stock tanks. So which sanitizer, we'll go back to that grid, which sanitizer would be best for plastic, do you think? Oops, shoot. If they're putting it in the water. So first off, let's look, which ones are good for produce contact? You can go ahead and take yourself off mute. Feel free to say something.
What was the question?
So which ones, so on this sheet, you'll notice on the left-hand side, there's a series of different characteristics, and along the top, you've got different sanitizer classes. So, and so like chlorine, if you look down and you look, if it's green, it means it is labeled for produce contact, direct produce contact in that bottommost row. So chlorine is marked with a green and peroxyacetic acid is marked with a green. So those both would be labeled for direct produce contact. So those are 2 choices of sanitizer that we could possibly use. Does that make sense to folks?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now if in that same example, if now I said that we had issues with pH in the water, which of the 2, chlorine and peroxyacetic acid, would be better, most beneficial to use? So if we,
Peroxyacetic acid.
probably true, absolutely. So the idea with the grid is really to kind of give you a sense of which classification or which classes to sort of narrow down the search. So again, and again, there may be situations where there's no perfect sanitizer. You may have, you may have to look at which is the less bad sanitizer or which is the less bad way to go. If you need to potentially like sanitize a surface or something. So again, it's important to think about a lot of different things.
I want to add to that, Phil, real quick, that we've had a lot of growers use, chlorine early on, switched to peroxyacetic acid and never looked back. And the reason was mostly about having to monitor the chlorine all the time and the amount of, and it was because of the soil sensitivity. So that part you see in there, chlorine is high soil sensitivity and low for peroxyacetic acid. So basically folks could, put some peroxyacetic acid in their dunk tank and use it, for an entire harvest wash cycle in a cooling dunk tank, which might last a few hours. Whereas if they did the same thing with the bleach, it would be checking it all the time and refilling and just way too much time.
Now I will, and Hans, I absolutely agree with you that there's a lot of folks that if they're dealing with a lot of dirt, PAA really is the way to go. There's one hesitation that I'm gonna put out there, and that is particularly on carrots. There have been known, PAA in particular has been known to wipe out a lot of the beneficial bacteria on carrots, and yeasts. When you put those carrots in storage, yeasts tend to proliferate and they'll rot the carrots. So in some cases, there's some tweaky things that you need to worry about. But for the most part, I think you're right, Hans, that hands down for the no fuss, no muss kind of affair, not to plug PAA, because I hate to plug any particular product, but it tends to work pretty doggone good. So, but know that there's more things out there. Okay. So thank you, Hans, by the way, I appreciate that. So we gave you a bunch of resources in your box, and I just want to take a second to go through some of the things that we gave you. Sometimes measuring stuff can be a real pain in the neck. So you'll notice, particularly on the hand cam, you'll see I've got the bottle that you got, the 2-chamber bottle that's got it's got a 1/2 and a 1/4 ounce measurement on it. And the idea is if you're measuring something out, this is a quick, easy way to actually, measure sanitizer, whether that's for washing the surfaces or putting into wash water or batch water. You could do that too. It's really easy and really fast. So you can just measure it out, dump it. You don't have to worry about getting a measuring spoon or whatnot. The other thing that we gave you is a turbidity tube. This is the big guy. And you'll notice that there's that little cross at the bottom. We also gave you a separate sticker like this to give or to use. And the idea is that this could be stuck usually to a tube that is not part of your to wash tank, because you really don't, you end up putting harborage points in your wash tank if you stick it to your wash tank. So you want to stick it to an alternative tube or something container. The idea here is that you want to monitor the turbidity. What we found is most people, when they look visually at their wash water and when it gets dirty enough to where they're like, yeah, I need to change that. That's really, you want to make note of where that is and try and figure out how much of that water gets in here when the X disappears. That really should be marked. And then that way, no matter how dirty the crop is that goes in, you're always changing it at relatively the same spot. For those, I sell these in state to most people in Michigan, and I say I deliver it because I bring it to them and then I calibrate it based on their dirt. And because I have an actual turbidimeter. Like the turbidimeters that you buy are really expensive. Like the portable one is like $700. It's crazy. So this is a $3 item and you got one for free because you're attending here. And the idea is that you can basically measure, it gives you a relative time in which you can change, or you can signal that you need to change your water. So setting a threshold is basically key, and understanding when the water seems dirty enough for you is a good place to start. And then if you want to tweak it to get it, less dirty, that's when you maybe talk to your extension agent or specialist on campus in your state that might have a turbidimeter that they can then calibrate it based on that. So, and what we've seen is most people are changing their water around 300 NTU, which is the measurement for turbidity units. And that's very dependent on where that level of water falls is really dependent on soil type, on cropping system, on a lot of things. So that's why it's important to calibrate them locally in your sort of with your dirt and with your products. And there are also a number of fact sheets that you can take a look at that I packed in there. The last thing I'm going to talk about real quick, and then we'll move it on to Katie and then come back for the make and take, is I sent with you a couple of these guys, a couple of these quarter turn nozzles. And we're going to use one of them for the make and take, but understand that these are nice to have around. They're really good for using on mini bulks and whatnot, so that you can measure things out without having to worry so much about trying to glug something in place. So it's a little bit easier to manipulate and manage. So those are some things that are in your resources. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Katie to talk.
All right. Thanks, Phil. Well, thanks all. I actually want to, there we go. Now it's working. So I'm going to start out with this video. And this is our new AZS that we bought this year. So this is using a lot of water. I didn't want to figure out how to put it into my PowerPoint. So it's easier to just show it at the start. And this is showing our whole wash pack. So below this, you see our trench drain for removing water. You can see we've got cement floor. That's new. We actually had some not very food safe gravel in the past. There's a bubbler. That deep tank is set up to bubble salad greens. And then behind her, you can see our greens dryer, which is a converted washing machine. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the PowerPoint slides themselves. Here we go. So I wanted to start out just by talking about what I love in my job, teaching about farming. So the photo shows me with a couple of organic farmer training program participants. I'm talking about some giant Napa cabbage there that I'm going to show them how to harvest. I worked on a lot of different farms and got to work with amazing farmers and learn so much from them, and then kind of moved into more management roles on some of those farms and was able to start passing it along to other farm workers before I started my own farm in 2006. And then I was there for a dozen years. And I got thinking that I wanted to get back into advocacy or outreach or education work. I'd done those sorts of things before and kind of during my seasonal career as a farm worker. And an opportunity opened up here at the Student Organic Farm, and I jumped at the chance. So I think what I love most is everybody comes in with different skills and different land and different markets they're selling into and different goals, and just working with folks on coming up with a business plan for the beginning farmers and the aspiring farmers in the Organic Farmer Training Program. But even, working with the undergraduate students on the farm is really fun too, on the farm and in the undergrad class I teach. So I'm so lucky to be doing this fun work. So my time as a farm worker, in terms of, I kind of mentioned the Wild West. I only worked at one farm that really had an official wash pack. So this was the 90s and aughts. When I was working on other folks' farms, and the final farm I worked at, they had kind of a lean-to on the barn with cement floor and drain and multiple triple wash sinks, and it was a good setup. Before that, it was like people were washing things on picnic tables and kiddie pools and just like pretty small scale, not very food safe under a tree sort of situations. I'm so glad that food safety has come a long way. And that people are really centering their farms on making sure that the food they're selling is safe. So my time at Groundswell, I'll share some photos, and then the rest of the talk is about the MSU Student Organic Farm. So I've got one slide about what I mainly do, which is working with beginning and aspiring farmers. But then we'll see an overview of the farm itself, talk about the wash pack, our food safety plan briefly, and how our certifications kind of overlap with food safety a little bit. So here's Groundswell Farm. I just went on to Google Maps, got the aerial. It's just I think you can see my cursor. So it's just this, from Quincy Street up, this odd shape. So this is muck soil. This is a floodplain, so definitely a huge food safety risk right here. This is the formerly the Black, now the Macatawa River. And it's a flashy part of that river where if we got more than 3 inches of rain in, an 8-hour period, that would come up over the banks and come into our field. And so the first time that happened, it's one of the worst floods people had seen in decades, many decades. And so I was reaching out to Extension and trying to find knowledge and what to do and resources. And it was really a slog I was getting. People were making an honest attempt on a Friday to get me in contact with someone. But I was kind of bouncing from extension agent to expert to another expert until I was able to find someone to help me out, which was fantastic. So This was our wash pack. We started out using tents over here as our wash pack, 10 by 20 tents. And then we put in this $40,000 30 by 48 two-story barn, and the downstairs of that was dedicated for wash pack. That was a big change. And then right here at the top, just above the barn, that's 2 semi-trailers. One of them was had a cool bot in it, so we were using that as a kind of 2-room different temperature coolers. So groundswell, I talked about that muck soil. This is a volunteer that was out at the farm who really got into the soil, and we got a great photo of just how dirty that soil can look. It's dark black, 50% organic matter. So we were doing a lot of triple wash. We were doing dunk tank, actually in bathtubs, weirdly enough, pretty low tech. And then we bought this old celery washer. And so originally when we first got it, it was reusing water, and we converted it to single-use water. Which was such a good thing. And I wish we'd known to do that immediately, but we didn't know. We also had a barrel washer. I know materials other than wood are recommended, but it was so efficient and helpful. And this isn't fully set up. This is as it was getting built. So I kind of mentioned we started out with these tents. They were 10 by 20 tents. We had 3 of them. We had pallets on the ground and some like rubber mats to make it more comfortable to walk around. We had a couple sets of triple wash sinks and bathtubs, real separate, so that we could be running, harvesting for one market here and another market in the other tent. We had the celery washer pretty early. I think we got that year 2. And just a tiny little 8 by 8 by 12 cooler. And we were working out of these really low tech circumstances until we had sales of about $100,000. It was absurd. It was really a bottleneck. So we did a food safety plan, planned for the barn, got the barrel washer, and switched to the semi-truck coolers, which gave us really just a ton of cooler space. It wasn't as humid as our original cooler using the cool bot, but it was nice to have all that extra space. So that's groundwater or groundswell. The problem was we did not have enough water. And so using single use on something like this celery washer, which was spraying up and down as the ring was spinning, that meant that we would have to fill a couple of tanks of water in times when we weren't irrigating or washing ahead of time. Sometimes at the end of the day, you'd be sitting around waiting for a tank to fill. So I'm not going to go into detail on this, but we started doing food safety trainings, I think in 2015 or 2016 was the first year we did our food safety plan. And so I started doing just a PowerPoint slide set at lunch. And then it was interesting, after the workers got trained for food safety, they're like, why are you only training us on food safety? Let's have lots of these trainings. And so I started doing other topics about working on the farm, and then also some topics on starting their own farms. And people really enjoyed it. It was great for worker morale. And we would pay them for the lunch hours when they did that. And they always got paid for half their lunch hour. So what I do now, probably the main thing where a lot of my time goes is to this MSU Organic Farmer Training Program. It's about half out in the field, half in the classroom, and it's really focused on having a learning community. So everybody's learning from everyone. I learn so much from the participants because they're coming in from livestock farms and cut flower farms, and my specialty is vegetables. So I'm learning from them. And then we also get a lot of second career people. So people who, they were a lawyer or worked in marketing. And a lot of these other professional careers kind of tie in nicely to starting a business or a farm business. And so we learn a lot from those folks too. So a big highlight of the organic farmer training program is going to farms. So we visit 4 or 5 farms in I think it's 5 one-day trips and then a weekend trip up to Traverse City. 4 or 5 in each of those, a few more on the Traverse City trip. And then we bring in guest speakers. They're mostly farmers, but sometimes, experts, professionals who are, working for FSA or etc. So great program. If you know anyone who might be interested, please pass along the information because we're taking applications right now. So I'm going to start talking about the Student Organic Farm, which is a really awesome place. I think it's a great place for learning for so many reasons. But one is we're doing tractor scale field production, and we're also doing really hand scale production methods in all of our hoop houses. So outdoors, we have typically around 4 acres of vegetables, and then just under that of cover crops. In addition, right in the summer, those vegetable acres, a lot of those will have cover crops in the winter too, of course. And then in the hoop houses, it shows the tilther in that bottom left photo. But the broad fork is really the amazing tool in there. On my own farm, we were driving tractors into our hoop houses, and that means like a 10-day wait to switch from a crop you harvested to a crop you want to plant. With a broad fork and a tilther, you can get that down to a couple hours, which is fantastic and can mean being able to fit in a more profitable crop or another harvest. So we'll also talk, I do still have a slide in there about marketing. So we'll talk a little teeny bit about marketing and the rest of the wash pack and food safety issues. So here's the farm. The day that the Google satellite took this photo, the farm looks pretty washed out. So I also included the more brightly colored one that a student volunteer made for some college credit. And we've got 9 hoop houses for a total of about a ½ acre. As you can see, they're all different sizes. We've got 3 that are the 30 by 96 range, 3 that are 20 by 96, and then we have some of the caterpillar tunnels that are like 16 by 96. And then our fields are split up into ½ acre sections so that we can rotate those around the fields for crop rotation. Let me know if there's any questions at all. Here's that marketing slide. So most of our produce, as you can see from the chart, is being sold as CSA shares. So people are getting vegetables from us every week. It used to be every week of the year except for spring break and Christmas. We took out a couple of weeks in the spring to help us get a better start to the season, and it was one of the best decisions we made. It helps the farm throughout the whole summer and fall to stay on track if we get a good start. So because we are a nonprofit, we are trying not to compete with other growers. We have a higher price than other growers in the region. And we avoid selling at farmers markets, but we are selling to campus dining. That went down, as you can imagine, in 2020. But I wanted to show kind of a more standard year. We had been running a farm stand on campus. Now we're doing online sales. We'll see what we do post-COVID with that. And then we're doing some wholesale as well to some multi-farm CSAs and to Argus Farm Stop, which is kind of a consignment local foods store. So our wash pack, you got to see the AZS, but I've got a picture of it in there too. And if you're on Instagram, you can follow that link if you end up with these slides after this talk. So triple wash, you can see here, we're using some of those plastic tanks that were mentioned, both for some soaking in these shallower ones. And then we have a deep one that we use shown here for a bubbler. We did the bubbler and the greens dryer, which is a converted washing machine. We did that as part of a workshop for Farmer Field School. I think we used to really rely, and I don't know how much we're moving away from this. We used to really rely on just a spray table with hardware cloth and a hose to spray off crops that were muddy. This shows right after we got the cement and the trench drain put in. That's just the pavilion that we're using for a summer wash pack. I should say in the winter, we are washing in an indoor facility, and we'll have to move that AZS in because it will be damaged if any water inside it were to freeze. So food safety plan. I really recommend that folks try a food safety plan. Probably everybody has one now. UP Food Exchange has a good example of one. I originally, when I was at Groundswell, I used the one from Family Farmed that was put together. That was a great template online. So at the Student Organic Farm, we have a food safety binder with any info we need all in one place. Just a 3-ring binder, really simple. It's also, food safety is 7 pages of our crew handbook that any employee gets. And it's not like 7 dense pages. It's more, it's more picture heavy, and there's a lot of white space. But still, it's a important part of that. And then we have a half-page handout for visitors and volunteers because we have so many people coming through the farm. Record keeping is so important. So this is the harvest log as of today. I went out to get updated photos, and there was this cute art on here. One thing that's cool that I didn't have in the last one, and just thought I would throw it in here, is our portable hand wash station. This is fantastic, especially for teaching. So we do an activity called rotations where we split OFTP into 3 groups. So there'll be like 5 to 7 people in each of 3 groups. And often they're going from harvesting to planting to washing. And so in the harvesting phase, when they're out in the field and away from water, to have a hand wash station so they don't all have to go to a sink and then go to the next activity makes it more efficient. And the same is certainly true. They use it for the crew for the production farming as well. It's not just an educational tool. So in terms of wash water, the focus of today's workshop, we're using the Sanidate. The first time I ever got Sanidate, I heard about it. We had been using citric acid at Groundswell, just a powdered form. And then organic rules were okay with any citric acid for a while, or at least our local certifier was okay with that. We decided when organic required that we'd get organic citric acid, and it just became, actually, it wasn't an expense issue, but it became impossible to get. We stopped using it anything for a while, and we were disappointed because the citric acid, and the Sanidate does this as well, both of them just made the crop store better. Particularly, we noticed it in really tender things like salad greens. So with those, what I really noticed is they just stayed crunchier and fresh and nicer longer, and it made it kind of a selling point. We didn't say we use sanitizer in our wash water to customers, but we really could say to customers that they could put this in the fridge and notice how much longer it would last than the salad greens at the store. And then so I got some Sanidate because we wanted to get back to having a sanitizer. I ordered it from Johnny's. It was a little bit expensive, but then what was the real deterrent to using it was I got reading the label, and I'm a real I'm kind of a toxophobe, and I know that this is fine when it's in wash water. It's fine on food. It dissipates and is safe in those terms. But I was a little freaked out about how corrosive it is, and not knowing a good method to prevent getting it on my skin or on farm workers' skin. So we just didn't use it. I ended up giving it away to another grower who used it. So that shows you how wimpy I am, or how brave I am not. And then we started using it here at the Student Organic Farm. Sarah made sure to get the nozzle. I had heard one horror story. Someone put a metal nozzle on. You definitely don't want to use metal because it, in this concentrated state, it can corrode it. And the story I heard was that it corroded through that nozzle, got on the cement floor, and pitted the cement floor even in its concentrated state. So that is a second person story. I didn't see the results myself, so if anyone knows otherwise, correct me. So we were using this size at the Student Organic Farm for a long time, and then we sized up to using one of these. So we have a little bit of a different nozzle on that one. But this down here, this measuring cup, that's all that we're doing. We're just measuring into this measuring cup. Each of our sinks has a quantity on it. So it says the amount of Sanidate that is appropriate for that sink, and there is a line. It's not, the line's on the outside of the sink, but you can kind of eyeball when it's full to make sure that we're having the proper rate. It's a really good system. You only have to do the math once. So this is the info in the crew manual, our farm worker manual, on Sanidate and Sanidate safety. We have 2 wells out at the farm, and this is the one that's supplying the wash pack. So I wanted to just briefly point out the few points where organic overlaps with food safety. So water testing is required. It's restricting manure application. So if you have either raw manure or a compost that hasn't been treated to organic standards, it didn't reach temperature for the right number of days, then you can't use that on a crop that you're going to harvest in 90 days if that crop does not have soil contact. And you can't use it within 120 days of harvest for something that does have soil contact. So like a salad green or a carrot or something like that. And no sewage sludge. So all 3 of those are positives for organic certification, but it's not really a food safety certification. We're also MEEP verified, and that's a water quality program here in Michigan. And it really focuses on proper pesticide and fertilizer management, but it has quite a few components, and it's annual paperwork. I think there's 1 inspection, but the inspections are not annual. And that's free, unlike organic. The MEEP is a free and confidential program. We did do group gap for a while in order to sell to 1 supplier, but we decided not to. The enterprise budget for that crop and that sale was an hour-long drive to deliver that product. Just didn't work out. If we had a good marketing opportunity, I think we would do group gap again. It was a good program. So last thing I want to do is introduce, so I'm the educational programs manager, but Sarah Gerkink runs the farm. She's the farm manager, and she does a fantastic job at that. Daniel Segerbruck is the assistant farm manager. And this time of year, we have I think we have 12 or 13 undergraduate students working part-time for us, but in the summer, this was our summer crew and they were fantastic this year. So that was all the undergraduates working for us. I have not been looking at the chat because I was sharing my screen. So I'll see if there's any questions in the chat.
Real quick, I want to bring up something that Hans put
Yeah.
in chat, and that
Great.
is the fact, and it's something I didn't really do a good job of articulating, but the reason that sanitizers added to wash water is not to sanitize the product. It is to kill the bacteria that are knocked off the product that could potentially then cross-contaminate cleaner produce that comes in. So the idea is really to sanitize the water and not the one. Sorry, that's all.
That's fantastic. I appreciate you saying that, Phil. Yeah, I agree. We're sanitizing surfaces as well as the wash water. All right, does anyone have questions for me?
This is Hans, I'd just say, I
Yeah.
want to say thank you for bringing that up about the corrosive part of it too.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like two different species. In its dilute form, like a PA sanitizer is very, very mild. And again, it's the reason that it's just a cross-contamination thing. But yes, in its concentrated form, I would really encourage people to wear gloves and glasses if you're measuring it out, because it can splash easily. You get it on your skin and you'll know it. It burns you. So it's really important to do that. It's not something to mess around with when you're handling the concentrated form of the material. But once it's diluted, it's fine.
Yeah, I second that completely. We're really careful when measuring that, and when I'm there, I'm kind of like, I measure out my amount in that measuring cup, and I'm like, I'm coming through with the Sanidate, and then make sure that it's clear of other folks before I bring it over to my sink to fill it.
We're going to talk, actually, we're going to follow up with a few things to handle it in
Good.
a safe manner. Go ahead, sorry.
Great. Well, I'm all set. If there's not any questions, we can go on to hearing about the Jericho Settlers Farm.
Sure. And I'm going to cover that real quick. One of the things that I saw in the presentation that Katie talked about was the nozzles. And sometimes people don't realize, if you direct your attention to the hand cam again, most of the Sanidate's going to come with a cap like this that's got a little yellow thing in the middle. You can use a pliers to get that out. They also sell this really awesome tool called the bung cap remover. And it's $6, and it's kind of expensive, but it has a little thingy that fits in that little hole that'll turn it, and then it comes out easily like this. And then once that comes out, you can take those quarter turn nozzles and you can screw that right in the hole like this, and it goes in nice and easy, and you don't have to worry about it. The other thing that I'm going to recommend, these are Teflon coated nozzles. And I would recommend you change them about once every 6 months, because in use, they tend to start seizing up after a while. So you can be working at it, and then it pops out, and that's not good. So I would change out the nozzles about once every 6 months to prevent seizing out. That's another little something to think about. So now back to Jericho Settlers Farm. Thank you for highlighting that. That worked out really well. Okay, so we're going to jump now. Okay, so I had a chance in 2018 to visit Jericho Settlers Farm. And those of you who were on the call last week heard from Mark Fashing, who is the sort of one of the two leads at Jericho Settlers Farm. And I there were some things that I was really impressed about the way that they handle wash water. Again, they're a 200-acre farm, 30 acres of vegetable production. They've got 2 acres under cover. They do a lot with like CSA and local wholesale. And they've been in business a very long time. This is sort of their wash pack building. It was not as built out when I was there, because it was, again, back in 2018. This is more like 2020. So they've added a lot of things to it. But back when I was there, what really impressed me is they put the SOPs right where you needed them. So you could literally watch the wash line set up right there. It was pretty awesome that way. And you knew exactly, no matter who you were, you could read the SOP and put together their wash line, and you knew, okay, I've got to do certain things in a certain way. And they, even on the greens tank, they absolutely put all that stuff right on the greens tank. So you knew exactly how much sanitate or how much sanitizer you had to put in that tank in order to make sure that you had enough to do the job. So I was really impressed by that. Another really good thing that they do that I thought was really awesome is they test for temperature. So you'll notice that the temperature, the actual thermometer is on a string right there so that they can test the temperature of the water. I thought I had a close-up pic and I don't. So but the idea is that everything that you need is right there and close at hand. So thinking about how you arrange your pack house or where you do your washing with wash water, keeping stuff close at hand is really important so that you're not having to go struggle to find stuff. So again, you've seen this slide before. It covers some of the things that I think that are sort of easy wins based on not only what we've talked about today, but what you got in your box, with the idea of monitoring turbidity, safer use of sanitizer, more efficient wash water management, and we're thinking about a sanitizer SOP and schedule close at hand to the where it's being sort of monitored. So now we're going to take a second and we're going to switch over to the hand cam. And if you have your box with you, you're going to need, I said you're going to need a screwdriver with, you're going to need a screwdriver, standard head screwdriver, and you're going to need the collar thing here. You're going to need, you each should have gotten a roll of Teflon tape in your box, as well as two of these guys, these quarter turn nozzles. And then the other thing that you got that was kind of special is this long, thin tube. And I'll show it over top so you can see it. This long, thin tube with the whiskers. It's got little whiskers of electrical tape there. So the tube is actually a Teflon coated tube, and it's really kind of the expensive bit of the bunch. These run about, I want to say it's like $10 a linear foot. So they're, even this little guy is kind of expensive. You wouldn't think it was that expensive, but it's Teflon coated so that you can use any kind of sanitizer and you don't have to worry about it corroding. PAA tends to be pretty corrosive on a lot of things. The other thing that's a problem with PAA is if it's in a closed container that doesn't breathe, it emits emits carbon dioxide, and it'll explode the container that it's in, or it emits oxygen and it'll explode the container it's in. So you have to be careful to make sure it's vented at all times. And that's important. So for the make and take, if you take your Teflon tape and then the one of the quarter turn nozzles, I would put, you'll notice first off, if you tried to slide in the nozzle into that tube, you're going to find that it's fairly snug to start with. But if you tried to put water in it or tried to put any chemical in it, you'd notice that it leaks. So it still has a little bit of it's got some room to go. And the problem, I gave you the collar to put on it so to tighten it up, but the problem is to get it tight enough to where it won't leak, you'll actually deform the plastic on the nozzle and it won't work. So that's why we start with Teflon tape. And what I would encourage you to do is put about 10 to 15 like 10 to 15 layers on. So go around 10 to 15 times. So I'm on 2, then 3, then 4, and 5. I've never done this on camera before. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I'll go to 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So what that should do is create a really nice snug seal when I put this on, right? So that snugs it right up and it's nice and tight. And then the last thing is to take that collar and slide the collar over top. So it's down like that. And then tighten that collar up with your screwdriver, just like that. You got to turn it in the right direction and make it just tight. If you've ever done plumbing before, they always tell you to do it till it's just tight. I did it the wrong way again. So, and that's the same thing here. You want to do it till it's just tight and maybe do a quarter turn more beyond just tight. So that way it doesn't get deformed. And there we go. So there. And that's all there is to making one of these turbidity tubes or the dosimeters rather. The other thing you want to think about is how much unit of sanitizer that you use per batch. So like I use in my home garden, I use 5-gallon buckets. So that's 2 tablespoons of Sanidate per 5-gallon bucket. So that's where I mark mine. I add 2 tablespoons to this and I put one of the lines and I use water to calibrate it. So I get it up to 2 tablespoons. I put a line of the one of the whiskers, one of the electrical tape whiskers, put it in place. And then I do another 2 tablespoons and then I put another whisker down and so on until I get 4 or 5. So then what I can do is I can literally have this loaded and go from bucket to bucket. Or if I have to change buckets really quick, I could turn it and dump and then turn it and dump. And it's really simple and really fast. And then the other nice thing is that I don't have to smell it either. If you've ever worked with Sanidate, it'll make you cry if you inhale too much of it. So that's the other nice thing is that this keeps it from having odor issues. So did everybody get that?
So this is a doser for Sanidate. So I'm measuring out individual doses based on how much I need. So, and then just putting it into my different my dunk tanks.
It can be used for Sanidate. It can be used for chlorine. You know, it's any one of a number of sanitizers. The nice thing is that it's contained and it's quick. So you basically can literally measure out like 5 or 6, you know, however many like tank loads or whatever your unit of measure is, and then just dump it in. It makes it really nice.
And is there a stopper for the top or?
A stopper for the top. What do you mean?
So after I've poured in the Sanidate, or you just carry it around like that? I was just thinking something at the top. You said not to, it doesn't smell. So I wondered if you had if there was a stopper for the top of it.
There's just not a lot of surface area for it to dissipate. For someone who wanted to show the final, Jeff, there it is right there. Do you see it where it's all put together? Oh, shoot. Is that help, Jeff? Is that a yes?
I'm not seeing if, how far down is that collar?
It's as far down as you can get it. You basically want to seat it on the quarter turn nozzle. So you want to push the plastic down or push the Teflon tube down as far as it can go on the quarter turn nozzle, and then set the collar right on top. There should be a little lip on your quarter turn nozzle. And like that little lip right there, it should set right on that lip.
Right above,
sorry, go ahead.
right above it, like this?
Exactly, right above it. And that lip is basically where there's like a soft, squishy, rubberized washer. And it'll set right on top of that lip as well. So it sets sort of in that washer, and then it's tightened up, snugged up just right there. And again, it is possible to get it over tightened, and then you end up with a leaky pipe. So you want to get it, like I say, just snug, and then maybe a quarter turn. I've ruined a couple of these, so that's why I know. So, and then once you know how much your dose is, that's when you put down the little whiskers. How'd it go, Jeff? Did you figure it out?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I need to put the clamp on there, but I guess that's pretty much it,
Cool. Cool.
right? All right.
Awesome. So it looks like you guys got it. That's awesome. Sweet. Okay.
Have you gotten feedback on these in use?
Yeah, I would be happy to get feedback if you guys use them, and you tell me it's full of that we should be doing something different. Then I'm happy to take that feedback and never use this project again. But I do use it like I say in my backyard gardening. I use it a lot when I'm doing greens and stuff.
I think it'll be really helpful.
It's just fast. And again, it doesn't, that way I'm not handling the chemical, which is really nice.
Mhm.
So, yeah, cool. Okay, our last bit is really to start a dialogue and discuss, where you guys think you can make some changes, or where your issues are. So where are your issues? You've seen this before. This is the same slide we used early on. And so I'm curious about what your issues are and what you guys think you're going to do about it.
And Phil, sorry, did we cover what this is?
Oh gosh, yeah. This is a two-chamber bottle. So the idea is, and if you go back to the hand cam, basically you've got the black screw top is where you load whatever it is you need to measure, and you can just load it up in that black top and then close it, and then you literally just squeeze it, and as you squeeze it, the whatever it is that you need to measure gets pushed up into that little tube, and that little tube then measures how much. It's got a 1/4 inch or a 1/4 ounce and a 1/2 ounce measurement, and if for instance, if you're measuring bleach, if you need to measure bleach or something for a very small quantity, let's say for cleaning or whatnot, you can measure 1/2 ounce or 1/4 ounce very quickly, and then once it's measured into that little chamber, then you can unscrew the white cap and then dump it out into wherever you need it. So it's a really nice way of closed system measuring out a small quantity of stuff. And you can buy them for larger quantities. If you have, if you want to do a much larger batch, you can buy much larger ones of these that measure 1 ounce or 2 ounces and have a nice closed system. So you're not having to handle a lot of material, and it can be very safely contained. Again, if you're using Sanidate if you're using Sanidate in something like this, you do need to make sure that it's vented so that it doesn't explode, because again, it will explode. Does that help, Billy?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
And so here I've got the little doser guy. So you're saying with your 5-gallon system, you would have it sitting up like this, and then you would measure out 2 tablespoons, and then you'd put your little whisker there. And then depending on how, well, you put it straight, not crooked, but depending on how many buckets you're using, you would just go up that way. Or do you do it in some other way?
No, I do it just like that. I put usually 4 buckets worth on the thing. So I'll load it up 4 buckets worth. You can, if you want, you can take and actually put this, affix this to a board so that it stays put. And the nice thing is, if you have your, and you're not going to see it from there. Let's do it down here. If you have your a 1/4 turn nozzle on the Sanidate bottle, then it fits nice and easy in there. So you can literally have essentially a closed system. Or as close to a closed system as you can get.
Right. And for the person who was worried about carrying it around without a stopper, I was too. And Elijah Craig top fits on very nicely onto this thing. And I'm going to use that.
And
don't know what it's about me. I just have those sitting around. But
what is it?
It's a bourbon.
When I thought it was, I'm like, wait a minute, I've heard that before.
I wondered if that's what you were using as your sanitizer.
Well, you could use bourbon for sanitizer.
Yeah, and there's like
talk about there's multiple applications.
Yeah, there's like the standard wine cork, but this is like a little fatter on some bourbon bottles. Anyway,
cool.
Good. Good to know.
It's time to start liking bourbon, everyone.
No kidding. Boy.
Value add product.
So I did notice that you can take that bung cap and it fits nice and snug on top too. So, but I think the Elijah Craig's a whole lot better.
What is the contact time for Sanidate?
Good question. Usually I think it's 45 seconds is what they say to
Oh,
neutralize cross contamination.
Okay.
But you should read the label because it's actually different. Sanidate, depending on the application, would have different contact times, and different PA sanitizers also, depending on their formulation and the other ingredients, have different contact times. So
Okay.
it's important to look at
That's-
that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. I'll check.
Instead
those
of the
out.
foggy recesses of my mind.
So I want to be sure when customers ask me that I'm telling them the right thing. So if I bring in produce from the field that is contaminated in some way, let's say some of my Salanova, and I put it in my wash water and it has Sanidate in there, and that Sanidate is going to keep other greens from getting contaminated, but will I still be putting contaminated greens in somebody's bag if that was contaminated when I put it in the wash water? Is it potentially still contaminated when I take it out, spin it and dry it and put it in somebody's bag?
I don't know that I would worry so much about, contaminating. I mean, if you're doing things right, if you're, not picking poopy produce, if you're, actively working to keep things clean, I think that's the first step. And I think there is some reduction in the level of contaminants or surface contamination. But the key is it's not enough to consider it sanitized produce. And that's the key. So they've done research to know that there's some reduction. Again, the other things that you're doing are going to help keep the thing safe, not picking poopy produce, picking into clean bins, making sure that you cool the produce as quickly as possible. Those kinds of things are what keeps people safe and minimizes the potential for contamination. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, there's a couple different things in the chat. The first one is about what are people doing with retained wash water? They're very conscious of water usage. They're just trying to get an idea of what people are doing.
I think that was in part a response to my very belated response to an earlier question about what we do with our wash water at SOF.
Okay.
What is retained wash water?
Brian, do you want to unmute and explain?
Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering what people are doing with the saved water that they have. If they're saving it back at all, or if they're just letting it drain out in the field, or what.
You're talking about water you've used and now you're done with it.
Yeah, like, if you're, for example, like we're a single-use water deal, so we're draining water out of our sink, and 4 or 5 gallons at a time, which just going back into the drain to us would be a wasteful water usage. So my idea was trying to save some of that water, and I'm wondering if anybody else is doing that, and what they are doing with it, if they are.
So do you mean like for irrigating crops or something, or doing?
Yeah, like especially if you're using like sanitizers and stuff. I mean, is it okay for that stuff to go back into the ground and perfectly safe at that point?
So there are usually rules. Different states have different discharge limits for things like chlorine. The thing about Sanidate is the breakdown products in Sanidate are basically water and oxygen. So that's kind of a nice thing there. I don't know if there is a discharge for a discharge limit for Sanidate, but like I say, for chlorine, I think the maximum in Michigan is 2 parts per million. So there needs to be a certain level of care when using chlorine in wash water and getting rid of it. Again, the thing about chlorine is it tends to bind so quickly with soil that if you're irrigating with it, one wonders how much of that is really gonna stick around.
Right.
And if you're not using sanitizer too, I mean, it's certainly, discharge, even with sanitizer, sort of in a grassy swale is generally the standard, at least in your area, Brian. And yeah, I mean, you could use it for irrigation or some other use, but it's basically gray water. So you wouldn't want to use it for irrigation, say certainly on raw eaten crops or on crops near harvest in general. I think it's just like, if it was a sanitized wash water, it's a little bit different. I think that the levels of bacteria in that would be pretty low, but then you also have the sanitizer. So it is, it's usable. I think it's usable, but I would just think about it a little bit and manage the risk.
Yeah, in Arizona, we're obviously conscious about water, and we've used it often for basins with trees, either, fruit trees, or that might be just part of a hedgerow or, some sort of shading component that's connected to the wash station. So it's just helpful for other plants that are around, but not on any crops that we're growing in the field.
I was just responding to Katie, who asked if it's hard to find food safe 2-chamber squeezies. And I would say I'm not sure if there's such a thing exists. I think there's just, it's weird because you're really not putting food in there. You're putting sanitizer in there. So I'm kind of hesitant to say, I don't know if this is food safe or not. I don't know that it needs to be food safe. That would be my answer to the question. Apologies, Billy, for direct messaging you the answer to that question.
I have a quick comment on sanitizer in general, and that it does seem like the kind of thing that just is sort of adds more time potentially, and could be kind of without an obvious benefit. I will say that the SOPs and systems in general, like if you go to Jericho Settlers and other farms that are working well, they're super efficient, which is a little surprising. But I think it has more to do with just how dialed in they got their systems, and then the employees really know of what to do, and there's some good feeling around and doing a good job and having a good system. And so there's an efficiency there that I think can really actually outweigh or override any losses, I think, in some of that kind of management. Plus you're getting a lot of risk reduction too, that you can't exactly see, but it's there.
We're way over time. I'm sorry. Like 5 after. I apologize.
Somebody asked Jeff asked in the thing, I don't know if we answered it, does Sanidate break down in discharge? Did we say that it does?
I don't know for certain, but I do know
Okay.
it breaks down over time, and this breakdown products are basically water and oxygen.
Okay.
It does break down. It's just more rugged than chlorine bleach. So it'll stick around a little longer.
Any other questions, concerns for the good of the order?
Well, Hans and Phil, I'm going to call BioSafe tomorrow, but maybe, off the cuff, adding a sanitizer to an egg washer. Have you had any experience with that?
It's labeled for all sorts of stuff. I bet you can find eggs listed on the label.
And there are wash products specifically for eggs I've seen. So whether or not those are sanitizers, I think they're mostly detergents, but
So Kendall's got an interesting question. She's curious about drain fields. How large would a grassy swale need to be? And has anyone seen anything innovative with designing swales in a particular way, maybe with marshy plants? This is where I think a lot of the sort of the rain garden approach to things might be helpful. Included in your packet is a UVM publication on advice on system design for wash water discharge. vegetable pack sheds, and I think that's helpful. It comes at it from sort of a more systematic approach, and it's really good. So thinking about the volume that you're going to discharge, and then the kind of like percolation rate you would need to move it through. I would encourage you to look at that as a starting point to figure out how big of a grassy swale you need. And then just try and build from there. And maybe I can, with a little time and a couple of friends, I can maybe come up with a much better answer than that sort of off the cuff sort of thing.
Yeah, the handout looks really great and helpful. It's hard for me to envision right now because we're also like adding new equipment and things like that. So my sense of how much water we're going to use is also kind of a new paradigm for me.
Okay.
So I have a good estimate of maybe what we're currently using. I can just go with that. But we're probably going to increase our water discharge significantly.
Well, maybe we can.
Rule of thumb is no, you shouldn't see major erosion and you shouldn't be discharging into surface water. So water into water, that's the basic thing. So it depends on a lot of factors, but I would watch, and yes, you could actually plant and construct an area that could help with that. You could have standing water for a while, as long as it's not eroding and going, into surface water. But we can follow up offline too, since it's
Absolutely.
overtime.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming.